In the show, the White Walkers make it up to here. We can safely assume that this area north of Winterfell, spanning the entire landmass, is mostly covered with them. This is the sum total of their achievement. The whole series came down to their invasion into the realms of men, only to cover less than 1/5 of Westeros, and being a pain to no more than one kingdom out of 7 of them, to the point where the rest of the kingdoms don't seem to have even noticed that anything went wrong, and seem to enjoy a comfortable short winter with none of the harshness, famine, and lack of harvest that comes with even a regular Westerosi winter. Now, is this how it's going to turn out in the books? Is George doing all this build up, the whole central themes of the series, the long night, winter is coming, Euron Greyjoy, lack of harvest due to War of 5 Kings, the theme of High Lords playing their Game of Thrones while the real threat lies north, all of this build up only for the White Walkers of the Woods to be a danger to like less than half of the north, some towns and maybe Bear Island? Although probably not Bear Island on the show, because show White Walkers can't be in the water. Show White Walkers also move differently. They run. They're very action movie oriented zombies. The World War Z comparison has already been made, and I think that's accurate. Martin's White Walkers very clearly do not run. They shamble, slowly. They're horror movie monsters, not World War Z. So it would not make sense for them to run from the wall, now fallen I would expect, to the walls of Winterfell in whatever time passed between Season 7 ending and the Long Night episode. I don't know, time is more elastic in these last seasons than it is in Interstellar's gravity plotline. It's not conceivable that this is how the invasion works in the books. So how can it work? Well, there are clues in the chapters. First, let us consider Cutter Pike's letter that he sent to Jon Snow from his ranging expedition at Hardhome in A Dance with Dragons, written by Maester Harmune. Dead things in the woods, dead things in the water, wildlings eating their own dead, which women call us slavers, attempt to take Storm Crow defeated, 6 crow dead, many wildlings, 8 ravens left. So there are many deaths, there's not enough food, so cannibalism is going on. In the darkest way, this might be a good thing if the bodies are being consumed and not left for the walkers. But that's probably not how humans are eating their dead. Human skeletons are quite resilient and difficult to break apart, especially if the body has frozen in snow. Those bodies are probably still intact and contribute to the dead things in the woods and water. The seas are stormy, but apparently that didn't stop the dead things from being in water, so that gives us some details we can use to see what happens when the wall falls. Firstly, the recently done Battle of Ice, the one between Stannis Baratheon and the Bolton Frey alliance in Winterfell. If the Nightlamp theory is correct, and I have no reason to believe it's not correct, Stannis is going to light the weirwood in the Crofters Village Island on fire. The weirwood island is on a frozen lake. The blizzard and the snows have made it impossible to make out where the beacon tower of the Crofters Village is, so Stannis can just douse the tower fire and keep only the weirwood burning, which will draw the oncoming forces led by Hostine Frey to mistake the weirwood as a beacon tower and draw his host into the frozen lake. The frozen lake has been weakened by Stannis' men's constant drilling of holes to find any fish to feed a starving army. It's a surprise the ice on top is still standing. It won't be standing once Hostine brings his host on top of it. Most of them will drown, and Stannis' army will ambush the survivors and stragglers and the retreaters from the sides, killing them all. This will be a rout. And then Stannis will march forward with his army to take Winterfell. And once he has taken Winterfell, Euron Greyjoy is about to conclude his battle of blood in the south, near the mouth of the Honeywine, on Whispering Sound, by killing both his own naval forces and the opposing Red Wine fleet in a gigantic blood sacrifice, just as poor Quentyn predicted in his Eldritch Apocalypse theory, and use the blood magic from this sacrifice to find a way into Old Town via Honeywine, climb the high tower, blow the horn of Joramun, which Sam currently possesses, and brings down the wall. As Stannis gets into Winterfell and deals with the Boltons and the Freys inside, the men he drowned and killed at the Crofters Lake, and whatever bodies he has left in his wake during the Battle of Ice and the Siege of Winterfell will be touched by the cold. The same cold that touched the bodies of Othor and Jaffer Flowers in Castle Black's storeroom in Book 1, when Jon Snow saved Lord Commander Mormont from the reanimated corpse of Othor. Linda Antonson, Martin's co-writer for The World of Ice and Fire, and other supplementary material for the series, has said that this is how ice magic works in this world. It's woven into the cold. The cold touches the bodies and it wakes them up. This is precisely how the cold will touch the drowned and the dead at the site of the Battle of Ice, the Crofters Village, and Winterfell, and wake them up when the wall falls. Stannis has been religiously burning his dead on his march from Deepwood Motte to Winterfell, but I don't see him waiting around to fish out the bodies from the lake and burn the lot. Why should he? The wall is still there. Bodies are just bodies after all. What he knows of the White Walkers is not true this side of the wall, as Melisandre would have told him. But as he gains control of Winterfell, feeds Ramsay to his dogs, serves justice on the stragglers of the Bolton Frey alliance, he will not even have the time to burn the bodies of those not in the lake, the bodies he created as he took Winterfell. I believe the Battle of Blood and Battle of Ice basically take place simultaneously, and the raid of Old Town not long after that. He won't have time. And Roose also did not, if I had to guess, burn the bodies of the squatters whom he hanged when he first came to Winterfell to wed Ramsay to Arya Stark. He had hanged nearly 24 or more apparently, while the bodies that resulted from the mystery murders during the Ghost in Winterfell chapters were explicitly burned, or at least Yellow Dick's body was. The squatters' bodies were hung from the walls to adorn Ramsay's wedding evening. They were not, as far as the reader knows, burnt. They will wake too, once Stannis takes over. This will be one of the first places the dead congregate when the wall falls. But these are not White Walkers, remember, these are just whites, the ice zombies, the reanimated dead bodies. The White Walkers are different species. The method to kill them is also different apparently. You need dragonglass to kill White Walkers, but dragonglass doesn't do anything against whites. The whites you have to light on fire as they shamble towards you, and pray they burn a hole before they can shamble all over you. And White Walkers and ice magic are not the only factor in this apocalypse. They are in the show, that is true, but Euron Greyjoy is not in the show. I mean, he is, but it's this guy, not the Eldritch guy. Euron brings with him a different kind of magic, you see. Yes, the Horn of Jarman gives him power over the wall, but let's not also forget his association with Kraken imagery. The Forsaken Sample chapter gives us the vision of Euron, in which dragons and krakens and sphinxes bowed to him. Krakens, yeah. Now we know Euron has a Dragon Tamer horn, which he gave to Victarion. We also know he's about to have the Horn of Jaruman, otherwise there is no use for Sam taking it all the way from the wall to Old Town for the plot. So what about the Kraken horn? The Kraken horn that Salador Saan tells us is in Claw Isle, in the chests of House Celtigar. Is it with Euron too? House Celtigar is over here, and while we know some of Euron's whereabouts before he declares himself King of Iron Islands, from his days as Euron Nightwalker and the Corsair Kings, we know his exploits lie in the Summer Sea, the Jade Sea, and of course the Smoking Sea of Valyria. But we haven't heard much about his exploits in the Narrow Sea. He hasn't really raided any towns here. He has not established reputation there like he did at Tall Trees Town. So it's safe to assume he hasn't gone near Claw Isle, or at least hasn't raided it. But then again, he has. He must have. He hired a faceless man. I dreamt of a man without a face, waiting on a bridge that swayed and swung. On his shoulder perched a drowned crow with seaweed hanging from his wings. Ghost of Highheart's prophecy. A faceless man killed Balon on Euron's employ. He must have gone to Bravos. What else has he hired him for? Well, Jaqen is currently in Old Town posing as Pate the pig boy, who has round shoulders, soft hands, and food stains on his robes. We last see him in Samuel's last chapter of A Feast for Crows, also Samuel's last published chapter. Fan theories are that he is almost definitely there to hunt for what Tyrion thought of as the blood-soaked tome, The Death of Dragons, sometimes called Blood and Fire, written by an anonymous source, the only surviving copy locked in the vaults beneath the Old Town Citadel. The book contains mysteries of dragon binding and blood magic related to dragons, probably, but it's undeniable that meeting Sam also puts him at a convenient proximity to the Horn of Jaruman. He shows up in Old Town, presumably right after murdering Balon in the beginning of Feast for Crows, but before that we saw him at Harrenhal, and before that, when we first meet him, he was at King's Landing. What was he doing at King's Landing? There are lots of fan theories, mostly ending up in the cul-de-sac that Jaqen was a voluntary prisoner. He wanted to get thrown into the black cells, but the motive for this still is all over the place. Well, Claw Isle is quite close to King's Landing. It's right there. Look, there it is. So, how long has Euron known of horns and their magic powers? About the Kraken horn? Probably a long time. He has been reaving the entire known world for so long, and even Salador Saan knows about it, and his piracy career is nowhere near that widespread as Euron's. Could Euron have hired Jaqen for more than just murdering Balon and finding the book at the Citadel? Perhaps. Could he have been looking for the horn at Claw Isle before we meet him? Jaqen's appearance is described a lot, with his hair getting a lot of attention. His clothing is described as filthy once in Arya's 5th chapter in A Clash of Kings, but we never get a full description of anything he is carrying. That's part of the mystery that Martin was trying to build as Arya's genie in that particular book. Even the knife meant to slit his own throat when Arya names Jaqen to be her third name is described as just appearing in his hand. He has magic, whatever possessions he has, I'm sure he hides them well. I bet the Kraken summoning horn is not in the chests of Claw Isle anymore. Jaqen has it. And he will deliver it to Euron, who will kill enough people so that he can blow the horn and Krakens will rise. Interestingly, there are 2 rumored Kraken sightings in the series so far. One of them is in the south, and the less recent one is much more northwards off the Fingers, much closer to the north. And if it's this close, how possible is it that Krakens show up in the north when Euron blows his horn? White Harbor is not that far from the Fingers, and neither is the Bay of Seals, or Carhold for that matter. As I was saying, unlike the show, White Walkers are not the only factor in Euron's apocalypse. There is a composite of things that will show up once the wall falls. The Krakens will probably show up in White Harbor and the Bay of Seals and kill people. Leviathans might show up in the White Knife, considering the imagery Martin has created in the Manderley's Merman's Court at Newcastle of White Harbor. But it is equally possible that Leviathans show up in the south, since the Manderleys are actually an exiled Reach House originally and not indigenous to the north. There is also another intriguing possibility: the Deep Ones, the ones who show up in the world of Ice and Fire, hybrid fish-human creatures that might have taken humans down into the depths to marry them or breed with them. Why would the Deep Ones be here? Well, Patchface said so. And I haven't seen Stannis' court jester being wrong about anything yet, because he isn't. Patchface is a prophet of the Drown God. He had drowned once in a sea storm, and had stayed drowned for 3 days, after which the sea returned him. A changed man, who talked in riddles that people at Stannis' court mistook for Alakwit's ramblings. Everything he has said, though, has come true, and one of those things that he has said is, "I will lead it. We will march into the sea and out again. Under the waves we will ride seahorses, and mermaids will blow seashells to announce our coming." The context in which Patchface says this is the ranging party that Jon wants to lead to Hardhome to search for Cotter Pike and the dead things in the woods and water. The context of course never matters to Patchface, he's always prophesying. The prophecy, I believe, will come true, but near the sea, or at least a body of water. Selyse is not stopping at Castle Black. If you remember, she came here from Eastwatch by the Sea, and she's going to the Night Fort ASAP. And while the weather holds at Castle Black, just a gusting easterly wind and a light flurry of snow, I'm sure it's about to pick up as Selyse sets forth on her journey to the Night Fort. And as the weather worsens and she gets to the Night Fort, the wall comes down and there is no more Night Fort. The winds might carry her and her remaining retinue astray. In fact, I bet it will, and they will come west towards the Milkwater River and the Bridge of Skulls, at Westwatch by the bridge, the westernmost castle of the wall. They might even go the opposite route, since Jon Snow was murdered by the Night's Watch. Selyse, if she hears of it, might decide that pressing on to the Night Fort, which is also full of Night's Watchmen, might not be a good idea, and goes back to Eastwatch by the Sea, which was already garrisoned with Stannis' men and has Stannis' fleet established there. She might consider it safer. Either way, she will be near water, and Patchface will be near water, and for the second time in his life, Patchface will go into the water and re-emerge with an army of the fabled Deep Ones, leading them as he promised, and kill Selyse Florent and whoever else he can. Then these bodies wake, because the wall is down. All along the north, wherever we know bodies are buried, the chances of them waking as soon as the wall falls is very high. Add to that all the deaths from the Battle of Ice and the Krakens and the Deep Ones, and you've got a lot of bodies. But that's the north. As I said in the beginning, what about the others? Is the Long Night solely a northern problem? Well, the Krakens and the Deep Ones aren't even just a northern problem, we know this. We know this from Nimbledick Crab, who in Brienne's Feast chapter tells her of the fish hybrids who'd steal little children to breed with. This happened at Crackclaw Point, right near Claw Isle. Hey, what a coincidence. It's also where the Whisperer stands, a ruined castle abandoned for years, with stories of a knight who would behead his enemies and bring them to his witch wife, who would reanimate their heads. The castle was once the seat of House Crab, who have moved from here for unknown reasons. From the stories, it seems this was probably a place of mass deaths. Whether it was talking heads or something else, this place seems to have witnessed a lot of deaths. Deaths in Martin's world are never just deaths. There is a magical quality to them. You can use deaths to create magic power, and I bet that a place that has seen a lot of deaths also has a spiritual quality that does lend itself towards the magic side of the goings-on of the world. What is commonly known in fantasy as thin places. Places where the curtain between magic and reality have always been thinner than other places. If I had to guess, the Whispers was one of those places, and Nimbledick's Squishers, who are either Deep Ones themselves, or descendants from the Deep Ones, were definitely responsible for it and still haunt this area. The area of Crackclaw Point, and Claw Isle if I had to guess. I'm not sure if Dragonstone is part of this, but that island has definitely seen atrocities. So if anyone in the Riverlands sees squishers and the deep ones rise when Euron brings in the apocalypse, it has to be this place, at the Whispers on Crackclaw Point, which coincidentally has a gigantic godswood. A perfect place for Bran to spy the rising apocalypse. Well, at least Whispers will be the first place in the Riverlands. We don't know where else they could show up, but now that we have entered the Riverlands, let's just go through this, not just the north. Let's go through the Riverlands, the Vale, the Westerlands, the Crownlands, the Reach, Dorne, Stormlands, everything. Let's see kingdom by kingdom where the White Walkers and the other agents of the Eldritch Apocalypse can reach. And, well, the Riverlands are kind of fucked in this case, aren't they? Most of the battles of the War of Five Kings happened here, most of the deaths of the battles happened here. We know this from basically every Brienne chapter in A Feast for Crows. She stops at a road near Rosby where poor fellows are carrying carts and wains full of Septon's bones who were killed during the war. The next chapter she stops at Duskendale, and we see the result of the battle at Duskendale between the Tyrells from the south and the Glover Tallhart host from the north under Roos's totally not suspicious orders. The results are graves beneath the sept of Duskendale and unmarked graves of the dead Northmen beside the sea. Then at Maidenpool, a very populous town, she finds Randall Tarley dispensing justice to the crowd for their crimes, both mundane and the ones of war. He hangs 4 people and means to hang more. Then she goes to the Quiet Isle, where the elder brother tells her of the countless dead they have received as they floated up the Trident as a result of all the battles that happened at the Forks, Red, Blue, and Green. Then she travels to Saltpans, which was raided by the Bloody Mummers and turned into a grave with ash left behind, while its castle, held by Sir Quincy Cox, did not protect its villagers and simply closed the door to them. A grim remake of the Storm of Swords chapter where Jaime, Brienne and Cleos Frey had come to Maidenpool to find Lord Mooten had closed the castle to its people, letting Maidenpool be pillaged by the Bloody Mummers. The same chapter that Jaime lost his hand. The pool from which the town took its name was so choked with rotting corpses that the water had turned into a murky, grey-green soup. The Riverlands is littered with dead, from the Battle of the Green Fork, Battle at the Mummers Ford, Gregor Clegane's pillaging, Battle under the walls of River Run, Battle of the Camps, Tywin's order to kill everything in the Riverlands on his retreat from River Run to Harrenhal, the multiple sacks of Derry and the retaking and retaking of Riverlands by Starks and Lannisters both, Battle of the Fords, Bolton's taking of Harrenhal, everything has cost thousands and thousands of lives. And even in the Dance with Dragons Jaime chapter, we see this reflected in the writing. Little remained of the fields and farms and orchards that had once surrounded Raventree. Everywhere Jaime looked, he saw his father's hand. Even in the bones they sometimes glimpsed beside the road. Most were sheep bones, but there were horses too, and cattle, and now and again a human skull, or a headless skeleton with weeds poking up through its ribcage. And the death toll in the Riverlands is not entirely done. The siege of Raventree was lifted by Jaime bloodlessly, but the siege of Seaguard was successfully accomplished by Black Walder Frey, by what I assume is violence given that it is Black Walder Frey, and Nymeria is there when Merritt Frey comes to Oldstones to ransom Peter Frey from the Brotherhood. In Storm of Swords epilogue, he sees pines, lots of it, and Nymeria is near a great pine forest at the beginning of the Mercy chapter of Winds of Winter, probably between Oldstones and Seaguard, where deaths just happened, and thanks to Nymeria's pack will happen again. Maybe southward at River Run, where Lady Stoneheart eventually plans her Red Wedding 2.0. Devon Lannister, the new Warden of the West, is about to be wed to a Frey. What fun. Catelyn Stark's own home, River Run, will probably host the wedding, given that Devon's aunt Jenna Lannister and her husband Emmon Frey are the current owners of the castle, and Jaime and Brienne are headed to meet Stoneheart. Probably George setting up Stoneheart, forcing them to infiltrate Devon's wedding and kill the Freys within. A revenge for the original Red Wedding. If Nymeria's pack comes to River Run, which it's still close to Oldstones, I presume whatever victims and stragglers remain from the Red Wedding 2.0 will be eaten by this pack of wolves. Plus, let's not forget, in the Vale, Elaine Stone is about to marry Harold Harding and declare herself Sansa Stark. As Littlefinger tells her, all the Knights of the Vale will pledge to her to win back her homeland. Which means an attack on the Riverlands by the Vale Knights, which finally enters the War of Five Kings and promptly find themselves in the middle of the Long Night, just as the Red Wedding 2 is being committed and the wolf pack is running around. Snow has already been falling in Jaime's last chapter in the Feast for Crows when Jaime is at River Run. If it was snowing here, it could well be snowing on Lannisport as well, and on King's Landing. Winter is marching south. Precisely, if snow is falling here, we have to guess it is falling elsewhere in the Riverlands as well. And when the wall falls, and the ice magic works through the cold, touching the corpses and waking them up for the White Walkers, my guesstimate is that this waking of the dead will also happen gradually through Riverlands. A march south, basically. First, it will happen in places like Seaguard and Old Stones and Raven Tree, the northernmost territories of Riverlands, and then River Run to Saltpans and then Maidenpool and Harrenhal, and southwards to Highheart and Acorn Hall. A gradual progression in keeping with Winter's gradual progression south, just in the middle of the Vale's war on the Riverlands, which will quickly have to turn into the Vale's war against the dead, and by the time A Dream of Spring rolls around and Jon Snow comes south, the battle for the Dawn. So many corpses here, this battle will be one of the worst. Given that from the Riverlands downwards, cremation is not common. Bodies are usually buried, not burned. Add that with the arrival of the Squishers at Crackclaw Point, and we have apocalypse stew, especially at the thin places of great carnage. River Run and the Twins, which is the site of the Red Wedding, northernmost of the Riverlands castles, and sits near the sea. And of course, Harrenhal, the cursed castle sitting with centuries of death in its bowels, where Vargo Hoat was fed his own flesh by Gregor Clegane just a while ago, as slowly, piece by piece, his limbs were hacked off, and then his nose and ears and eyes to feed the flowing prisons of Harrenhal. Thin places don't come nearly as prepared as Black Heron's Folly. This castle will be a very interesting place in the long night, especially when Jon and Dany unite here, their eyes set firmly on the God's Eye Lake in front of the castle, where an island full of weirwoods would be waiting for them, where Bran and Euron would be locked in a duel on the weirwood astral plane, as dragons and squishers and wights and White Walkers circle around them in very climax of the long night, trying to win the battle for the dawn. The Riverlands, especially the Trident, will be the climax of the battle. That much is certain. Dany has foreseen this. The dream she had in A Storm of Swords, where she is on Dragonback, battling at the Trident against the usurper's hosts armored in ice, was definitely a dream sent to her by Quaithy, since Dany has otherwise no idea what the White Walkers are. She even gets some of the details right. She calls the enemy the usurper's host. She's only wrong about the names because she associates the names with what she knows, because humans cannot know what they cannot imagine. She doesn't know what the White Walkers are yet. She is correct about the usurper, except it's not Robert, it's Euron, coming to usurp her children, her place in the meta-narrative, and of course, usurp the gods, as is his goal. So here at the Trident, near Harrenhal, and later at the God's Eye Lake, are going to be key positions of the battle for the dawn, which means a lot of White Walkers, Whites, Deep Ones, perhaps Krakens, etc. would congregate here. We're going too far south, though. What about the Vale and the Westerlands? Well, we already have a Kraken sighting off the Fingers, and we have possible Leviathans showing up near the Vale in White Harbor. And another factor I mentioned in the last video, it's about Willemyn Frey. I think all Freys are doomed to die in the series except for Walder Frey, and that includes all the male Freys, anyone who could be declared heirs. Even those who swore oaths to not take up lands or titles or last names, which includes quite a few Freys. Freys are not especially well known for oath-keeping, so my theory included the death of Willemyn Frey, who is currently Maester Willemyn at Longbow Hall. Now, Littlefinger has an interesting murder mystery surrounding House Hunter, saying the youngest of the Hunter heirs, Harlan, has killed his father to gain power, and he and the middle brother, Eustace, is about to kill Gilwood Hunter, the eldest brother and current lord of Longbow Hall. Could Maester Willemyn be in this scuffle? Sure, but I think Willemyn Frey is a spy for Littlefinger and has been feeding him info about the Hunters. I don't think he gets to tell Baelish about Harlan's murder of Gilwood though, because by the time this happens, a Kraken will show up in Longbow Hall, which, well, it isn't exactly the coast, it's just a few miles off the coast behind a few hills, but it overlooks the sea straight through a valley nearby. And the Kraken will kill Willemyn and the brothers Hunter, a sort of representation of the Long Night taking over the Game of Thrones. There will be more Krakens showing up in Coldwater, Snakewoods, Heartsholme, and definitely in the Three Sisters and other places along the Bight, maybe even Gulltown. And let's not forget, snow is beginning to fall in earnest. Not that much in the Vale yet. The Winds of Winter Alliance sample chapter has mention of autumn still lingering in the Vale lowlands, but that's not gonna outlast the wall falling, I bet. The progress of winter will be faster because of it, and as the Krakens rise from the depths and start killing people, we can expect the dead to rise by the time the Vale army has crossed into the Riverlands, and Sansa and Littlefinger are leaving the Vale via Gulltown. Watch my Littlefinger video. Same concept, the cold will touch them and they will wake. Will we see some Deep Ones and Squishers here? Well, if they show up in the north with Patchface near Eastwatch by the Sea, and they show up south in the Whispers at the Riverlands, I don't see why they won't show up here. I don't yet know what draws deep ones though. Blood draws Krakens to the surface, that much we know from Ariane's Winter sample. But deep ones probably have much more complex and magic-oriented motivation to show up. The White Walkers themselves though, I don't see them showing up here. The Vale is a little tucked away. You have to make your way down the neck from the north to reach it by land, or you have to swim from the Bay of Seals to the Fingers to get here. Either way, if they show up late. Very late. Probably never. But that doesn't mean ice magic won't work here. Whites will definitely be here, regardless of White Walkers, but the dead will be less numerous here. Less than almost all other kingdoms, thanks to Lysa's decision.
The Knights of the Vale will stay in the Vale where they belong, to protect their lord.
The Vale has avoided war, and even now, if the Vale Knights declare for Sansa, the main theater of war is going to be Riverlands in the north, not the Vale itself. So this might be one of the safer places in the long night. I mean, Krakens and Whites and everything will be here, but lesser in number and hopefully more easily managed. The mountain clans could come in handy here, coming down from their station with steel and fire, and serving as the last hero figures on this side of the continent. The coming of the Winter and the Westerlands is also a bit uncertain because we have never seen it. We've heard a lot about it, but only in the Winds of Winter, I believe we will get to see it. Martin has said that Jane Westerling will show up in the prologue of Winds of Winter, which means Forley Prester and his 400 men is the party we might be following as they make their way with the Westerlings, Edmure Tully and some other prisoners of the War of Five Kings, as they make their way down the river road from Riverrun to Wayfarer's Rest probably, and then to Golden Tooth to pass between the mountains. Presumably, according to fan theories, about to get ambushed by Stoneheart and the Brotherhood Without Banners. Whatever the body count is, I doubt those bodies will waken immediately because there is a very good chance that the ambush happens before Euron gets to Old Town. The bodies will rise, no mistake, but it will take a while. The more immediate threat to Westerlands comes from Lannisport and of course Casterly Rock itself. Let's not forget the original story of the founding of Casterly Rock, told in A World of Ice and Fire. Legends tell us the first Casterly lord was a huntsman, Corlos, son of Castor, who lived in a village near to where Lannisport stands today. When a lion began preying upon the village's sheep, Corlos tracked it back to its den, a cave in the base of the rock. Armed with only a spear, he slew the lion and his mate, but spared her newborn cubs, an act of mercy that so pleased the old gods, for this was long before the Seven came to Westeros, that they sent a sudden shaft of sunlight deep into the cave, and there in the stony walls Corlos beheld the gleam of yellow gold, a vein as thick as a man's waist. This is the great gold mine of Casterly Rock, and it runs deep. Very deep. Not Moria deep, but deep enough. And it is in the base of the cliff that meets the sea right below the castle. Now, when Euron blows his Krakens on her horn, I can see some Krakens showing up in both Lannisport and in these mines. Or who knows, some other eldritch horror, just as the Balrog showed itself in the mines of Moria. The Forsaken names quite a few of them: the Black Goat of Qohor, the Three-Headed Trios, the Drowned God himself, perhaps coming to raid Lannisport, or the Pale Child Bacalon, or maybe even Nyarlathotep, the actual Lovecraftian god, whose Church of Starry Wisdom shows up in the Song of Ice and Fire universe. In Braavos, a church which, according to George, has branches in many port cities throughout the known world. Maybe including Lannisport? Euron did promise his own people Lannisport as part of his pledge to become king. His ascendants in Old Town will definitely manifest horrors here by the sea, and from the sea they will march uplands, towards the mountains and southward towards the Reach. Maybe Tarbeck Hall will play a role, which is also a castle by the sea, where Tywin Lannister committed his most famous atrocity. The amount of horror and trauma here could characterize this as a thin place, and by a dream of spring, the White Walkers come down from the Riverlands past the Golden Tooth, maybe even chasing the Vale army, which will try to garrison at Lannisport to save themselves. They must have planned to come west if they were to liberate Sansa Stark's home from her enemies, considering Casterly Rock is her primary enemy, so that could drive them here, right as the White Walkers come down on their heels. Then we come southwards, to the Reach and the Crownlands. Both are very doomed. Once Euron captures Old Town, it is about to be a hotbed of magic, and eldritch creatures, Krakens especially, and the reanimated dead from Euron's Battle of Blood. Euron will definitely take his host of destruction and spread in three directions: north towards Highgarden, probably chasing Samwell Tarly, his friend Alaras, actually Sarella Sand, and probably Obara Sand. Obara is currently going towards High Hermitage to confront Gerald Dane, the Darkstar, and arrest him in the name of Prince Doran as justice for cutting off Myrcella Baratheon's ears. But what Obara wants, her heart's desire, is to raid Old Town. She was born there. When she was little, her father Oberyn Martell came to take her away from her mother, who was a sex worker. He slapped the mother and dropped his spear in front of her and forced her to choose between the spear and her mother's tears. She chose the spear. Ever since then, she has been trying to retroactively prove to her father that she chose correctly. Sacking Old Town as revenge for Oberyn's death made no sense, but she suggested it to Doran because that is her Oedipal instinct, a psychosexual hang-up she has trying to prove that she made the correct choice retroactively. She will turn against Doran, team up with Darkstar, and sack Old Town. High Hermitage is not that far from Old Town, and when the sack goes very, very out of hand, and Krakens and the dead start showing up, she will flee with Sorella Sand and Samwell. Maybe she'll try to flee back south, but I'm sure she will not be able to. She has something that needs to go north. Dawn, the legendary sword of the morning, that has been with the Danes for centuries, which might be the original Lightbringer sword forged by Azor Ahai. Darkstar has Dawn, not for long, he will die in Old Town. The sword goes to Obara, then Euron's forces kill Garland Tyrell, who is at the end of A Feast for Crows, raising a host to defend Old Town, and then Euron cuts off Obara's retreat south by sending the dead to High Hermitage and then to Starfall, presumably to search for Dawn, which he wouldn't suspect Obara to possess. This is probably when snows grow heavy here. They are already falling in King's Landing, so definitely they'll fall here by the time Old Town falls, and the number of dead increase, and they rise since the long night begins. So falls Highgarden as the dead move north towards King's Landing, and south past Three Towers, if I had to guess, underwater through Torrentine into Starfall. King's Landing is equally doomed. Jon Connington is about to enter with steel and fire, raiding what he can and giving over control of the Red Keep to the Golden Company. He will do this right after the Battle of Steel, a battle between Mace Tyrell's forces of what remains of the Lannister-Tyrell alliance and his Golden Company. Brynden B. Fish has talked about how horrifying this battle is about to be, probably in the vein of the Battle of Agincourt, a battle between the English and the French during the 100 Years' War, where a central tactic involved drowning the heavily armored and weighted French cavalry into the mud of Azincourt as an ambush tactic. It has been raining in the Rainwood, as Ariane's sample tells us, and the road has turned to mud. If it is raining in the Rainwood, we have to assume a mixture of rain and snow in the Kingswood, which is to the north of the Rainwood, on the way from Storm's End to King's Landing. And this will also produce mud. The Kingswood is almost certainly the site of the future Battle of Steel, maybe near Windwater. This is Jon Con's tactic. Most of the Tyrell men will drown here, and then Jon Con enters with his Prince Aegon Targaryen, popularly called Fagon, into King's Landing, which will definitely give him some resistance, both at the gates and near the Red Keep. The gates might be managed by the anti-Lannister Faith militants, aided by Taini Sand in disguise, who is stationed here currently as a septa among the Faith, to watch for the coming of Daenerys, Doran's orders. Daenerys is not here, but Fagon is close enough once Arianne decides, out of jealousy towards her brother Quentyn and his prospective Dragon Queen, to marry Fagon, thus bringing Dorne solely into the fold of Team Fagon. There will be a sack, however small, and there will be deaths, specifically Myrcella's in the hand of Jon Con, but I'm sure more people will die. The ones protecting the Red Keep and small folk who gets in Jon Con's way. Jon Con will not be operating on intellect, he will be operating on PTSD. The siege of King's Landing will involve bells ringing, which will trigger Jon Con's PTSD with the bells, which signaled his defeat in the hands of Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon in the town of Stony Sept, leading to the death of Jon Con's crush Rhaegar Targaryen and the fall of the House of the Dragon. Jon Con has PTSD and grayscale, which he contracted saving Tyrion in Essos at the Bridge of Dreams. Both these factors create a cocktail of emotions that will spill over at King's Landing, causing a lot of slaughter. But both the sack and the Battle of Steel might not lead to the dead bodies waking up, not yet. I think Euron brings the wall down after Fagon is crowned, then the ice magic takes some time to creep in southwards. Otherwise the conditions are perfect. Snow has already been falling here, it will no doubt get deeper. And my favorite thing, Krakens. The recent most Kraken sighting is at the Broken Arm in the south. If the range of Kraken sighting is from the fingers to the Broken Arm, and the city sheds blood during the sack, then the Krakens rise first. And then the dead. King's Landing will probably face this gradually. The Krakens will smell blood and come up first, then they will get news of the dead taking control of Old Town and marching up Highgarden towards King's Landing, which Fagon might just dismiss as just a very serious, strong Ironborn attack, because that is the going tale spread between the Red Wine Fleet, Old Town, Garland's attempts to raise forces, etc. So Fagon might try to send his own men in battle, and thus he inadvertently adds to the dead. But by the time he sends a host, the ice magic will definitely reach King's Landing, and Krakens will become more and more numerous. The bodies buried in the Battle of Steel will finally wake up, along with the bodies buried at Duskendale. And Derry, which has seen 3 sackings during the War of Five Kings, currently under the control of the widowed Amarai Frey and her mother Maria Derry. Slowly but surely, King's Landing will be surrounded. And if Victarion's Dragon Tamer horn works, which I'm sure it will, just not the way he thinks, he won't get anything out of it. No dragon, no Dany. The Dragon Tamer horn is bound by blood to Euron. The dragon will come to Euron just as King's Landing is surrounded by the dead and Krakens are eating their people. Euron will descend from the sky and claim the Iron Throne. Not all of the dead that rise from the Battle of Steel will go to King's Landing, I'm sure. Plenty will roam the Stormlands and by the pull of magic will be attracted to Shipbreaker Bay, where Patchface was once given back by the drowned god, towards Storm's End, which is a place of magic full of forgotten spells. Another place that might see the advent of the fabled Deep Ones or maybe Squishers. Either way, the ice magic will definitely penetrate to here, long before any White Walkers can show up here. If they indeed will ever show up here. The Whites definitely will though, and very soon, right after Fagon's coronation if I had to guess, and night will gather on King's Landing and the south. Dorne is difficult. Just like Littlefinger's Game of Thrones was difficult for me to predict when it came to Dorne, I can't really predict what Dorne will look like under the Long Night in the Apocalypse, both for the same reasons. They are too far in the future. The Long Night begins in the north, and Dorne will be where it hits last. I am almost 100% sure that Euron will make his way into Dorne, especially if the Dragon Tamer horn works for him and he gets his dragon, he will fly there. He wants Lightbringer, I think. I don't think he knows yet what the Lightbringer's sword actually is, or if he does, he hasn't given any sign that he knows. Nobody in Westeros seems that worried about acquiring Lightbringer so far. Not even Melisandre, who thinks that a fake glowing sword is enough for her chosen Azor Ahai. Dawn is for sure the real Lightbringer. And I don't know if Euron knows this or has been tracking Dawn with his glass candles, which he has definitely possessed since A Clash of Kings, which he was known for in Karth as Eurothon Nightwalker. Dawn is the most unique sword in Westeros right now. It is ancient, it has completely different description than any other sword, including any Valyrian steel sword, which are comparatively less rare. It is said to be pale as milk glass. It was apparently made from the heart of a meteor. It has only seen ownership in the hands of the Danes, one of the most ancient houses in Westeros, probably older than Dorne itself. A house that made its legends and its home styled after the meteor they made Dawn from. It is very unique, but I don't know if Euron suspects this to be the sword that won the battle for the Dawn. He will find out about it now though. Once he is in Old Town and the Citadel is in his grasp, he will see whatever documents he can see, and he will set out towards Starfall, the home of the Danes, trying to find the sword, and he will bring with him death and ruin. But Starfall is tucked in a corner of the Red Mountains in the mouth of the Torrentine, cut off from the greater plains of Dorne. Whatever atrocities he commits here, it will be personal to the Danes, and not reflective of much of the rest of Dorne or the Martells. It will not reach Sunspear. In fact, the dead will probably not get to Sunspear for a long time, given that Dany has to kill Doran first. There is a lot of build-up for this. Doran's whole life has been wrapped around slow, quiet revenge. He hides it better than his brother Oberyn, but he is no less vengeful. Daenerys was supposed to be his vehicle for that revenge against the Lannisters. That's why he sent Quentyn to propose to Dany and Meereen, but because of everything that went wrong, Quentyn dying due to his own desperate hubris, Quentyn's sister being hastier than her father and joining forces with Fagon, whom Dany will definitely see as an enemy when she lands in Westeros, it's prophesied at the House of the Undying. She is the slayer of lies and Fagon is one of those lies. He is not Aegon, he is fake. A fake Targaryen, who's actually a Blackfyre, the bastard branch of the Targaryen family who have been responsible for 5 civil wars during the Targaryen dynasty. Dany is not about to forgive Doran for siding with Fagon when she comes here. Only after she burns Doran, I think, will the dead come to Dorne. My guess would be the Water Gardens. The Water Gardens of Dorne have been consistently set up as a place of innocence, of children growing up, a place of peace and laughter. This makes me worried that something awful is about to happen here. Euron could come here himself maybe, burn the Water Gardens with his stolen dragon. There are a lot of noble children in the Water Gardens. We know Lady Lara Blackmont's children used to play here. A boy from House Dalt of Lemonwood. Lots of aristocracy, lots of noble blood. Does Euron need noble blood in his blood sacrifice rituals? We know he's using priests because he knows the value of holy blood. We know he knows the value of king's blood because he is sacrificing his unborn child since he is king of the Iron Islands. Watch my video on the writing of villains for details on Euron. But does he have use for noble blood? I think he does. Either way, we will see, and wait for Euron to show up at the Water Gardens. As for the rest of Essos, I'll leave that for another video because that will take longer to research. I know Ib will be important to the Long Night in Essos. We may even have ice dragons showing up on Ib. Ib is easily the most legendary place in Essosi North. It has a different race than the known world. It has sailors' legends, most notably legends about the Thousand Islands nearby. East of Ib, where some unknown watery cataclysm destroyed towns and towers many thousands of years ago, whose residents sacrificed sailors to fish-headed gods who come to shore when the tide recedes. The Deep Ones. The Ibbenese legends are talking about the Deep Ones. Whatever the Long Night looks like in Essos, the Ibbenese would definitely be some of the first to face it, perhaps getting swept away in a tide of ice dragons and Deep Ones. Sothorios has its own ties to the Deep Ones, of course, and the oily black stone that they seem to worship. The same oily black stone that is the base the High Tower stands on. The same oily black stone Euron's own sea stone chair is made of. So yes, the Long Night is a composite apocalypse, where the dead rise and beautiful creatures armored in ice comes out of the woods in the north, krakens rise from the sea to pull people in, and human-fish hybrids come to take slaves and cause destruction in their wake from the dark shores. This is true everywhere. Even Dany will, I think, get a taste of the Long Night while she's covering the ground she needs as a character. Maybe near Mantares, a city she will definitely come near, a city already considered to be infested by monsters. Horror is coming for the known world. Or there's always a chance that the others only come to Winterfell and try nothing else, and a brave Arya Stark stabs the problem to death, but somehow I find it less likely. Like, share, subscribe, I have a Patreon.